This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. If you, or maybe you know somebody with a child diagnosed with ADHD, you need to hear this. This is somebody who will advocate for you within the school, working. She's actually an IEP master coach and helps you get the resources from your school district that you and your child deserve. Goes even deeper than that, though. She's walked this journey herself with her family. And a lot of the challenges come up regarding behavior. We're going to focus on that, or at least start with that today, with Karen Lowry joining us again on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here and giving us a view of the challenges that go along with having a child with ADHD. And certainly behavior is one of them that comes to the forefront, right?
Yeah, I pinpoint that because I think it's very important to understand that behavior can be a significant part of ADHD and also can be a result of so many things that create the behavior. And so many times, people just automatically think, and, kids without it, just so-called normal kids, you can control your behavior, or you need to learn how to control, or you're mature enough now as a middle schooler to control it. And that's not always the case with ADHD for so many reasons. And that's without that understanding, their self-esteem drops into the bucket because no one's really understanding them. So there's causes of it. And I also want to talk about the issues that parents face, because there may be some behaviors in school, but those behaviors, I think, sometimes escalate at home because some of these kids can and try to keep it together in school. They come home to the unconditional love and support, and that's when things fall apart. And parents see all that.
I never thought of that, but it makes perfect sense where this pent up energy, frustration, it's got to go somewhere.
Yes,
it's home.
Exactly. And if there's no support in place, they're coming home, and I did live this too, they're coming home with homework. So then what you have to think about, and I think that it's important for parents to realize that, maybe you need to talk to that, depending on the age, of course, but as early as you can, that child. And, they eventually have to learn about themselves, but what works for them? Or if you try as a parent, different avenues, what works for you regarding coming home. So do you take them they've already been in a learning environment, so they should keep on in that environment, finish their homework real quick and move on? Or are they in that position of needing to get a break and have movement in their life? Movement is really important. Do they take a break and then reel them back into the time where they have to do some homework, and figuring out what works for you and for that child? Because again, I always say this, but I think it's really important because I hear people all the time and I just cringe when I hear, oh, that kid has ADD. That means he's like really active and all over the place. Not necessarily. I mean, every child with ADHD is different because they are an individual. How ADHD impacts that child is different across the board. So how it will work for that child as far as homework is going to depend on that child.
You mentioned self-esteem, and certainly a factor as a child gets a little bit older. How can you foster some positivity there with the self-esteem as a child may be struggling?
So I think important to know is the self-esteem can get better once there is support in the school. And there's so many interconnecting areas about what we're talking about right now, because you as the parent are in the position of gathering that data. You're gathering data as to what's happening at home, how long is it taking for homework, how much help is that child needing? All of that's important data. And that data goes to the request for testing in the school to see whether or not that child is eligible for a 504 or an IEP. So it's called all interconnecting. And it matters Because if you have a child with ADHD, imagine even a kid without it would be horrified. But imagine a child with ADHD coming home and because of processing issues and focus issues and impulsivity, they cannot finish the homework required of them for 4 hours. And they could be in second grade, they could be in third grade. That is not anything that you need to expect or, think that that's okay. And I mean, that happened to me as well. And I know the first thing that I did, and I'm sure many parents do that, not knowing what their rights are, is you fill in. You become the homework police
Mm,
and you fill in a project was due and you didn't even know about it. You fill in, you do, so that that child doesn't have low self-esteem. That child gets to school and he gets it done and nobody is yelling at him. But unfortunately, then the school doesn't know what's happening behind the scenes and doesn't realize how much he needs support. So it's in the end not really doing your child or you any favor at all, because that is also impacting your relationship with your child because he's tired and he is feeling somewhat oppositional sometimes and pushback. And you, the parent, are making him face homework that he doesn't want to do and shouldn't have to do 4 hours of. So
mm.
it's a lot. It's a lot. It's like when I'm talking about dealing with a child at home with homework and figuring out structure, that's one thing. And that's a positive thing. I'm assuming now that there's support already in the school and he's not coming home with 4 hours of homework. But the other side of the coin is he's in there struggling away, coming home with all this stuff, and he can't finish any of it. And that's where there needs to
Mm.
be big time communication with the school from the parent.
Is it impactful to track this in deeper detail? Even as an example for the school, even if it's a week or two with a calendar. All right, he came home, he had this amount of homework, and listed, had 13 pages in this book, blah, blah, blah. Took him 4 hours to get through all of this. Then the next day, like just presenting your case if you're feeling that you're not getting supported the way you should be.
Absolutely. And when I speak of data, that is data. Sometimes people hear data sounds like what I have to be a scientist,
Right, right.
Data is the information that you need to request a full test. And the other thing I want to mention regarding the testing part, we're talking about behavior. Behavior, and you can read about this as well, but it is true. Behavior really is a form of communication. There is a level of frustration going on, and you have to
Hmm.
ask why. And it may not be just the fact that, your kid is oppositional because he has ADHD. Yes, that's a piece of it. But what else is impacting the behavior? Why is this child pushing back and missing assignments and not wanting to do homework? There's more to it than that. And I think when you line up the data, you have information to request the testing that the school is actually mandated to do for any child whose areas of disability, whether or not he's diagnosed or not, areas of disability that is impacting his access to learning. They have to listen to you. So for you to be in a position of saying, listen, I just really think my kid needs testing, that's just not enough. You
Mm.
need to list the data that you see with this child coming home from school, and that includes any emails that teachers are sending you regarding their concerns about that child too. That also impacts many times teachers are the people that are seeing the problem in the classroom. So you have that information right there with you, and then you can request the testing. And the testing may find that your child has a learning disability because up to 50% of kids with ADHD do have some form of learning disability. Now, can you imagine if you have an undiagnosed learning disability and you're not receiving support for it? And so that's another level of frustration that only adds to that vicious circle of bad behavior, so to speak, right? Bad
Mm.
kid. People think they're bad kids. What kid doesn't want to succeed, right? But they're seeing people around them succeeding and they're seeing themselves not. And why is that?
I think it's beautiful what you said about communication. we shouldn't look at their behavior as, oh, well, what they're doing, they're communicating. They're trying to tell you something. They're providing you with information. It's not just a child who can't just process things. They need help, and they're trying to tell you that. So all of that to be documented for the school if you feel that they're not hitting the mark in terms of helping your child.
Exactly. I mean, I've had a client where this child was in first grade and it was a nightmare for a while until there was communication between parents and school, and there was an acceptance that there was things that the school could do to minimize some of this unacceptable behavior in the classroom where they weren't paying attention or they were running around in the classroom and not focusing on the topic. There were reasons for that. And some of those reasons were the need for, this child had some sensory issues. So there was a need for maybe taking a walk, getting movement into their day, those kinds of things. And again, it's all individual, but in this case, that was an important piece to help him regulate his emotions and therefore the behavior that he showed in school. So
What
it's
are the
kind of complicated depending on the child, really.
and every situation is different. And
Yeah.
I give you much respect there because every situation is different. So every child is different. Every parental dynamic is different. Every school district is different. And the one that my kids are in, people tell me that's a very difficult school district to work with, and I've seen it.
Oh,
Trust me.
yeah. Some of them
Yeah.
aren't.
Some of them
Definitely.
are breeze, and it's you never know. You never know. When it comes to behavior, what other things can you share with us that we should be mindful of?
Well, I think that a big thing is just, I mean, I shouldn't say just, nothing is easy when you're dealing with behavioral issues with a kid with ADHD. Believe me, I understand that. But I think that they really do need some kind of structure. And I
Mm,
think, again, when I think they're old enough, I think there's um, reason to have discussions around the structure that's going to happen at home. You know, let's try a system. So it's not like child comes home and it's like, so how was your day? Did you do okay? Did you finish your homework? And meanwhile, the kid is like, whoa, I just don't even want to talk to you about any of it. So maybe that child needs to decompress. Maybe that child needs no conversation about school, but maybe a snack and half an hour of playing outside. Well, that's what they should be doing. I don't know how many kids are playing outside these days, but they do need that. They do need that interaction or running around and playing. Anything other than schoolwork. And then the agreement would be, but then we have to set aside, you know, X amount of time to do what you have to do, and then we'll talk about what you have to do. Structurally, what comes first. Sometimes it's easier for a child to start with the homework that's the easiest for him. Sometimes
mm,
it works better the other way around. So that can make a difference too in the behavior. But again, I would also say it's really important to follow district policy. There's no way a district is saying that 4 hours of homework for a second grader is okay. I have heard 20 minutes per grade level. I don't know what it is right now. I think every district probably is still different, but they all have homework policies. And that's something to focus on too. What is your current policy? And what we're doing is not fitting into it. So again, if you're operating under a structure like I'm talking about, and you see, even if your child has a 504 in place, for instance, and you see that after 1 hour, this is what he got done, that's it. That's the policy time. And you write, this is what he got done. And he's done now. And so you're his advocate. And I think the question is, is this enough homework to have proved that he understands the topic? Does that
mm.
and is the accommodation in place in the 504 adequate? Because he's not finishing the assignment that you're giving. And certainly he's not going to be finishing it if he's sent home classwork that he didn't finish. That's a big no-no. And that has happened. Classwork and homework, no way. There's just no way that can happen. So then you have to evaluate then what's happening in the class where he can't do his work. And that's, I think, again, very complicated because You may or may not have a 504 in place, and that may be another period of collection of data to prove that perhaps the 504 is not enough. So that's another issue. But again, this all intertwines around behavior because I mean, anyone has to admit the fact that if you're frustrated about something and you can't do it, how is that affecting your behavior? It certainly is. It
Mm.
certainly is. You're not feeling good about yourself if you're expected to do it and you can't. And that is what the issue is. So I think that's really important to always be aware of that and always keep a structure at home. Be aware that, maybe your child can't sit for more than 20 minutes. He can't finish something for 45 minutes. So he's got maybe a time timer, which is very helpful to set, and it adds to the structure. He does 20 minutes. He feels good about himself. He takes a 5-minute break. Now, sometimes, depending on the age of the kid, that's difficult because it's hard to take a break sometimes and then come back to it. So you have to kind of like figure out what works for you and your child in that way. But I think doing all of that, it just, you as the parent are the most important person in his life. You know him the best, and you are showing him that you believe in him and you know that he can be successful, but that you also understand that he needs some structure and he needs some breaks. And the expectation can't go above what he can do, or that also will lead to more behavior, if that makes sense.
So let me further complicate things and ask you, how do you find that delicate blend where you don't want to enable your child, but you also don't want your child to realize what's going on here and take advantage of it? If you know where I'm going with that, where now, oh, I can do this and get out of homework. How do you set those boundaries, making them realistic, supporting your child, but pushing them to the point where you know that they can go to that point and at least get more work done?
I think that's a good question. And I think a lot of people, especially people who don't have kids with ADHD, question that and question whether or not somebody is getting out of something just because the 504 is leveling the playing field,
Mm.
because this is what this child needs.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I don't know quite how to answer the question, except that your expectation is always there to do what is expected of him. You're only helping him add in accommodations to allow him to get it done, So I just think, again, every child is different, but it's not like you're saying, well, you have ADHD, so you're privileged and you don't have to do any of that. You're saying you have ADHD. You are just, and these are the things that kids are thinking that they're not because they have it. You are just as smart and sometimes more smarter, intuitive, bright as everyone else around you, and you're capable. You have areas of struggle in order to complete the things that you need to complete. And that's why support is in place for you. And it's a way of you learning about yourself, and down the road, you may or may not need those supports anymore. Or down the road, even we're talking about high school and college, you'll know the type of things that you need to interject in your day to make yourself successful. So it's a big learning curve for the child as well to learn about it. I mean, I have a friend whose child is 29, the age of my youngest, and she said her son is furious and wishes that she never told him that he had ADHD and how negatively it impacted him, and he felt different. And I felt bad for that. And you can't really correct something that's already happened necessarily. But I think that's wrong. I think if a child knows what he has, but it's presented in a positive way, and that this is not going to affect you as far as success, it's just learning what you can do with support in place, and that other people may not have ADHD, but they still have struggles. They still have issues, no matter what. Everyone isn't perfect in everything. So I think it's all about the presentation and your expectation of your child, personally.
As a parent who walked this journey with children with ADHD, do you feel that in that situation where you don't want to enable, but you want them to do as much as they can, that's possible, do you feel that you would know? you pick up on the energy, what's going on there. You're going to know that, your child is maybe taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I definitely think that. You do know your child best, and I definitely think that. And I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen that kind of situation, even in my situation as well as, a kid who's trying to take advantage of it as much as a relief that the support is in place. He's willing to do what he needs to do with some breathing room to get
Yep.
it done.
Hmm.
So I think generally that can work.
Anything you can tell us that we haven't hit when it comes to behavior and just managing that as a parent with a child that has ADHD?
I guess I would say one other thing too, because I'm focused on the home thing and what parents can do.
Hmm.
Um, I've heard so many stories about, you know, sometimes schools really have trouble dealing with those kinds of things in the classroom. And parents will get phone calls about, your kid did this during the day, or your kid is doing this during the day. I mean, that's a big red flag. First of all, the parent's not there to fix anything. You can't have your kid come home and then sit down with that kid and talk about all the bad things that you did in the classroom like 5 hours ago. First of all, you don't want to approach it that they were bad things. And second of all, that kid probably forgot all of it. He just
Mm.
totally forgot all of it. He's moving on. So you can't correct it hours later. And that is why that is considered data to use to have the support in place in the classroom. And also calls that say, your kid is doing X, Y, and Z, you need to come and pick him up. Red flag. You're not responsible for coming to pick him up. They are now preventing your child from accessing their education. Another red flag of the need to sit down and talk about testing, IEP 504 eligibility, and maybe even doing a functional behavioral assessment, which can be done for a behavior plan. So it's, again, actually collecting data in the school within different environments to see what is happening, like when he's in math versus when he's in English, versus when he's in science versus when he's in no structure on the playground. And that is very invaluable for someone to come in to do those kinds of, and sometimes schools don't have someone to do that as like a psychologist, and they have to go outside of the school, and that's okay. But that kind of thing can be done to come up with some kind of a formal behavioral plan so that calls don't happen and we can fix things right as they happen, not after the fact.
See, that is so valuable. And as a parent, you may not even be aware of a lot of the evaluations, these tests that could be available that you can ask for. And the school district should be providing. And I'm sure there's other ones there that if they don't, for whatever reason it may be, as long as it's a valid reason, that you can fund it as well if you want to get deeper into the evaluation. It's a beautiful blend as a master IEP coach and an ADHD coach. You put it all together, you get it. You get it. Nobody does what you do. How do we connect with you, Karen?
I have a website, KarenKLowry.com, and I have an email, Karen@KarenKLowry.com. Um, and I'm on social media as well, ADDadvocate on Facebook, and I'm also on Instagram, Karen Lowry 16. So if you need any help or you have questions, just please feel free I'd be
Yeah,
happy to talk to you.
you
I
got
do offer 20-minute consults that are free to just discuss some concerns that you have and see if we're a good fit to move forward in trying to fix those things.
beautiful. Also, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. If you have any questions, insight, you can keep it anonymous if you'd like. That's up to you, but we'd love to hear from you. And Karen, thank you for being here today and sharing all of this. This could be a godsend for a lot of parents dealing with some challenges, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Steve. I appreciate you having me because people need to know how they can advocate for their child.
Got to get the word out. All right, we'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.